Hello everyone, I'm Rikki. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at FXhome and the lead of the Imerge project. Today, we're going to look at the top 5 effects in Imerge to fix your photos. If you don't already own Imerge, you can download the demo from our website. Let's get started. We'll begin with number 5, the tone colouring effect. This is great for removing colour casts and adding colour tints to different tonal ranges in your image. It works like this. The first thing in the user interface is a chart with a gradient representing the colour wheel running horizontally. Along the middle, we have a line indicating the neutral line. Then, we have 4 circles we can move. Moving them up will add the colour they are positioned over. Moving them down will remove the colour they are positioned over. You can drag these about horizontally to specify the colour you want to add or remove. The larger dot manipulates the entire image. The black dot indicates the shadow areas of the image, which is the darkest parts. The smaller white dot relates to the highlights of your image, which is the brighter parts. The grey dot indicates the midtones of the image, which is everything in between. So, let's take a look at this image. We can see it has a blue colour cast. We're going to remove that so we get to a fairly neutral image in terms of colour balance. We're then going to use the shadow and highlights controls to add a film-like look by adding teal to the shadows and orange to the highlights. One effect and 3 drags of the mouse has enabled us to correct and grade this image in terms of its colour. Moving right along to number 4, the colour adjustment effect. This is great for making hue, saturation or lightness changes to an area of your image based on a colour range. Let's use this image of a camper van to see how this works. You define a hue and saturation range of what you want to modify by positioning and sizing the selection box. The colour selector will move the box to be centered over a colour you pick from the canvas. Softness will smooth out the transition between what is selected in the colour range and what is not. Protect blacks, protect whites, and protect skin tones allow you to tell the effect not to affect these areas. You can use the View Map toggle to visualize what is selected. It will show white where the pixel is fully selected, black where it is not selected, and levels of grey in between indicate how much of it is selected. Once the selection is specified, you can then choose to make modifications. You can modify the hue in one of 2 ways. The first is to shift the hue. If you want to very slightly tweak the colour, use Hue Shift. Let's slightly tweak the colour of the camper van by moving it from red to orange by moving the slider slightly to the right. The second is to replace the hue. If you want to make a larger change to the colour, such as completely replace it for a very different colour, then use the Hue Replace option. This makes it easier to make larger changes, but also deals with problems around edges in the colour channel which cause fringing that looks inverted. First, we position the hue slider over the colour we want, and finally, we set the strength to 100% to move it there. The next thing we can do is increase or decrease the saturation of the selection. Let's slightly desaturate the blue of the camper van. The final thing you can do is change the lightness of each pixel. Let's just slightly darken the blue on the van by reducing the lightness slider. Number 3, the clarity effect. This is great for adding pop in the form of fine detail sharpening and contrast in the larger contours of your images. What makes this so interesting is the grittiness and details of the texture in the face. The shot straight from camera is a little bit soft. We can use the amount slider to add contrast to the underlying contours of the face. Next, we can increase the structure, which sharpens up the fine details like facial hair. You can reduce the clarity too, and this will smooth things out while preserving edges, which can be useful when trying to soften skin. This all produces a result free of the typical haloing you get around edges from more traditional sharpening filters. And number 2, the dehaze effect. This is great for removing and adding atmospheric effects like fog and haze. Here is a picture of a forest path. We can see we have fog in the image which is washing out the scene. If we increase the amount slider, it will remove this and give the forest a very different atmosphere. We can also use this method to increase the haze by reducing the slider. Another example of this is in its use to improve skies. This image has a nice sky, but it feels a little bit washed out. Let's increase the amount slider and it will remove some of this, improving the contrast in the details and causing the blue colour to come out. And finally, number 1, the exposure effect. This is great for adjusting the tones and overall saturation in your image. When adjusting tones, it's useful to monitor the histogram as it can show problems that your naked eye alone can struggle to see. The chart shows dark tones on the left through to bright tones on the right. The grey line represents the luminance tonal range, and there are separate lines for the red, green and blue colour channels. Let's take a look at this effect in action on 2 different photos. First up, here's an image of a cliff in RAW format. Straight out of camera, the photo looks a bit dull and there are issues with the sky and sand almost clipping to white with little detail. We'll begin by trying to reduce the exposure. For this image, that's not really working. The foliage is going dull and we're not recovering detail in the highlights. We need to stretch out the highlights so that there is more of a difference in that area and you start to see the detail. So, let's start by reducing the highlights to around -60. If we look at the histogram, we can see that there are no tones at the dark end. So we reduce the blacks down to -11 to take advantage of this, and the extremely dark areas have moved slightly towards black instead of grey. We're still lacking contrast though, and the scene as a whole feels a bit washed out as the midtones are too bright. So next, we reduce the midtones down a bit to -40. Let's also use the contrast slider, increasing it to around 22. The final thing we need to do is inject some intensity into the colours as they are a bit dull. Let's grab the saturation slider and increase it a bit until the green looks good at around 35. This is okay, but the rocks in the cliff have gone a bit too orange. So let's back this off a bit to around 20. We can now use the vibrant slider to further boost the greens, but it will protect skin tones. This rock and sand is close enough to skin tones that it is also not affected. Now, let's compare this to the original by toggling the visibility of the effect. That's looking much better. Let's take a look at a different photo of a seating area on a beach which was shot in the RAW format. Looking at the image and its histogram, we can see that it's too dark and not using the brighter tones. Let's fix that by increasing the exposure slider to around 3. As we move it, we can see the histogram stretching out to use all the available tones. Next, let's increase the shadow slider to around 25 to brighten up the dark areas in the trees and show a bit more detail. The image is much better, but it's still looking a bit flat. Let's add some contrast by moving the slider to around 26. Let's increase the saturation to 30, adding more intensity to the colours. Now let's toggle the effect off to see the original, and back on to see the change. That's looking much better. That's it for today. Let us know in the comments what other Imerge tutorials you'd like to see, or if you have any questions about the software. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more Imerge tutorials.